Well, I'm really glad to see the judge get that level of applause, because without him, many of us would already be in Guantanamo. So he needs no introduction. And Barbara Comstock, who served in the Virginia House of Delegates and in Congress in the old days when it kind of functioned. And I'm George Conway, and we're here to talk about the rule of law. We are all members of actually not a fledgling group. It was originally formed in 2018. It was called Checks and Balances, which is the name of the panel. And then we've reformulated it for the current age and call it the Society for the Rule of Law. And we're all about talking about the threats to the rule of law, which many of you can identify, and trying to rebuild respect for the rule of law. And so that's what our panel is about today. And I'll start with Judge Luttig. Why is this important? Microphone.
I guess I'm no longer on Twitter anymore. First off, a heartfelt thank you to all of you in this room for this reception of the panel. If there's hope to be found, it's to be found in this room and like rooms across America in the next 6 to 9 months. Donald Trump has tested America's democracy, the Constitution, and the rule of law beyond the breaking point over the past 4 years. And he promises to break America's democracy, the Constitution, and the rule of law on his way to the White House in 2024. That's not hyperbole. That's what he promises to do. And that's why his followers will elect him again to the highest office in the land, if that's possible. America's democracy and the rule of law have never been tested like this before in the almost 250 years since our founding. And it's safe to say that it will never be tested like this ever again if we prevail now. If we don't prevail now at this very moment against this existential threat to America's democracy and the rule of law, then we will have fulfilled the founders' greatest fears, that America would have fallen prey to the demagoguery of a demagogue president of the United States. That's what's at stake, George. Nothing more, but nothing less.
Seems like a lot.
It would seem like a lot.
And Barbara, as the politician among us, what do we do about this?
Well, I think we do what we're doing here this weekend in this great organization that Heath has put together and has been, we've all been working towards over, these past many years. Donald Trump is a major underperformer, and that's what's on our side. And, we've seen that, you saw that last night, you've seen it in every primary he's been in, but mostly, you've seen it, when he was in office, you've seen it every year while, in the primaries, in everything he did. And so that's why, take heart. We have the Constitution on our side, we have the rule of law on our side, and it's only if you get discouraged. Many of you here were yesterday when Sarah Longwell was talking about, don't get discouraged. Stay at this. I was in a swing district when I was in office. I was never supposed to win any of my elections. I was in a blue district, and so every time I ran, I went out there and I wasn't supposed to win. And, for 10 years, I kept winning until Donald Trump came on the scene. So, I feel like, this is going to go well this year because the American people see Donald Trump for what he is. And they do respect the rule of law. It's just very frustrating to hear things as we go along here. But George and I were talking earlier, you've also, I think some of you have the permanently banned t-shirt. Does anyone have that on here today? I got mine. Nikki Haley's permanently banned. So I did want to have a little legal colloquy here with George because I think...
I don't practice anymore.
But I think since Nikki Haley did overperform last night, and she's staying in here for the race, she's coming to Virginia, I did want to be able to give her maybe a little legal advice, since you guys are better lawyers than I just was a legislator. But
no, you just wrote the laws.
That's right.
He applied them, and I made
Nikki,
arguments unsuccessfully to his ilk.
And but Nikki's an accountant, so I thought given she is, she did previously say she was going to, support Trump or vote for him or wouldn't maybe pardon him. But given she has now been permanently banned, wouldn't that make null and void any previously commitments she made that he has permanently banned her? Don't you think that?
What do you think, Judge?
I think you want to rule on that?
Well, I have the same view of politicians that our founding fathers had, presciently had. But the problem, Barbara, is that...
We just need a yes.
No, he gets to ask the questions. That's how that works.
I ask the questions. I don't answer.
Exactly.
The problem, Barbara, with what you just said is that many, many, many millions of Americans see Donald Trump for exactly what he is and who he is, and they want him back in the White House.
But he has been doing the politics of subtraction, and that's what he's been doing since 2016. He has been banning people. You've seen in Arizona, Meghan McCain has been out there and he's been telling people, take a hike, take a hike. Carrie Lake said, take a hike. And he's been doing this in many states. I know so many people who served in his administration who didn't even vote for him last time. I can tell you, I won't tell names, but people who worked at the RNC.
Well, tell names, please.
In 2020, who worked at the RNC and didn't vote for him. That's why this obsession about loyalty. But I can tell you, there are people who are going to be working on his campaign this year who won't be voting for him, because to see Donald Trump up close is to learn about what a bad person he is, and then they don't vote for him. I had people, right at the end, people said, wait, I've seen all these things. And you saw the young woman yesterday, Cassidy Hutchinson, Sarah Matthews, and Alyssa Farah. These are the people who were there, almost up to the end, and they saw what was going on, and then they had to walk away. They said, this is bad. The scales fell from their eyes. And this is what happens just for so many people who are up close. And I think this is what we're seeing, month after month. So please, do take heart with what is going on here. And I do think, it's what it's going to come down to, as Sarah, Longwell pointed out, is it's those few swing states. It is, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, Nevada, Arizona, Georgia, and it only takes, a few of those states for the Democrats to win. In most of those states, Trump is bankrupted. They don't have money. Donald Trump right now has 200,000 fewer small dollar donors than he had at the same time 4 years ago. He has bankrupted a number of these parties with all his bogus, election arguments. So there are so many factors that the press doesn't cover that are in the weeds. And if you look at the recent Swazi race, I can tell you Donald Trump's, one of his pollsters worked on the Republican side of that race. And they told, informed by a good source, that they were told that the Republican was going to win by 4 points. 4 points. They lost by 8. 12-point swing there. Now, the Republicans were doing their usual thing of those big rallies they have. They always love the big rallies where they just preach to the choir. In contrast, what were the Democrats doing? The Democrats were working in the field. They were working all their various constituency. They were knocking doors. They were working hard. They were getting out the vote. They were sending out emails at 6 o'clock saying, we still need some phone banking to make sure we're getting out all these various constituencies, and you could hook up right away to phone banking at 6 o'clock to get out more votes. Republicans weren't doing that. That's how they got those extra 8 points, because they were working like they were a tied race. They ended up winning by 8. So 12-point swing there because they worked like their lives depended on it. Republicans just had their rally, and Elise Stefanik was there saying the whole nation is watching. She wouldn't have been there if they thought they were going to lose. So they think they're winning, and they keep underperforming. It's a pattern.
I share your optimism.
But I don't. Barbara, from your lips to God's ears. I don't do math, and I certainly don't do political math. But the only math that I attempt to do, and that I've attempted to do to date, is that Donald Trump is not under the number 270. And until he's under 270, America's democracy is in peril.
Well, here's my optimistic view is I think 80% chance you're right. But it's 20% chance of essentially being destroyed by a thermonuclear bomb. So,
well, certainly work like,
but
you always work like you're behind, which is certainly what I always did. Work,
But
and that
here's
is what
the thing.
Democrats
To go back to the rule of law, what about the damage that has already been done? Trump can lose. Trump will lose, I believe. But hasn't there been just an enormous amount of damage to the respect for the rule of law that is an ongoing damage that is an ongoing threat to our democracy and to our way of life? I throw that out.
Well, of course. That's nothing more than to state the obvious. The damage that...
Thanks for cheering us up, Judge.
I didn't come to cheer. But no, the damage that Donald Trump has done to the rule of law is inestimable, but more importantly, it's irreparable. America will never again be the beacon of freedom, the beacon of democracy, and the beacon of the rule of law in the same way, if at all, that it has been for the past 250 years. The real damage that the former president has done to all of those is that he has normalized his behavior and his conduct and his rhetoric into American culture and American political culture. Think about that for a moment. Normalized it into the culture. No longer will it be unprecedented and unthought that a politician, even a president of the United States, would seek to overturn an election that he lost. Never again will it be unprecedented or never thought that a president who had done that would stand on that conduct, stand on those grave crimes against the United States of America, and defy the nation and the Constitution, and then even run for President of the United States of America again on that platform, we will never recover from this. Hopefully, with time, we will get beyond it, but America will never recover from this.
But on the positive side, what has been good, I mean, unfortunately, Donald Trump has, he's shown politicians, shown us who politicians are. And unfortunately, many of them, you've seen them for who they are. If you've kind of watched SNL last night, politicians have lied to us about the election being stolen for 4 years, and unfortunately, you saw like in South Carolina last night, I guess 2/3 of Republicans thought the election had been stolen. So that is what is unfortunate. But in the courts have said, no, it wasn't. So we have the 60+ cases that rejected Donald Trump's lies. We've had the over 1,000 cases that have gone through the courts saying that the people who stormed the Capitol, that they were criminals. They are not hostages. They were not tourists. They are criminals, and those cases continue to go through and be upheld and prosecuted. And as a result, those people, when Donald Trump was indicted 4 times, there were not turnouts of mobs again coming out. And a year ago, I remember debating a Democrat saying, oh no, we cannot indict Donald Trump because mobs will storm the courthouses and it'll be horrible. There'll be riots in the street. And remember that first indictment, few people down at Mar-a-Lago, but there were no big mobs because they realized the rule of law was working and that they would be arrested like those people. And that's because of you all and the people in this room, and because of what the January 6th committee did, because of what Liz Cheney did, because of what Adam Kinzinger did, what the judge did. It was because of a few good men and women. It just takes a few good people to do the right thing to make that difference. Now, it was a few people who made those sacrifices.
Well, we have all those hundreds of people who have been prosecuted.
And then you had, E. Jean Carroll.
Right.
Being put together with a good lawyer, and because of that, we now have an $83 million verdict. We have, the court cases that are going forward, and now the $500 million verdict he has, and now we have 2 more cases that are going forward that he is going to, and those things grind slowly, but they are going forward. So you have all these legal cases that are working, and because of that, and the Electoral Count Act, we put that forward. So, yesterday when people were saying, what's going to happen if Donald Trump doesn't accept the election? Well, Kamala Harris is going to be sitting in the chair next time.
Well, let me throw it again. I mean, all of this is great and true. That
He can't do what he did last time.
He can't do what he did last time, but we still have these hundreds of people being prosecuted as criminals for their criminality, except this one guy who's gotten a bit of a delay. But can these legal proceedings against Trump set the record straight, in a sense, and set the country straight? Is there hope?
Well, when he loses, it's going to be
I'm going to direct this to the judge. Can the courts help fix the problem?
Well, to go back to Barbara's original comment, I don't know what SNL is. It sounds insidious.
Saturday Night Live. Well, yeah.
It sounds vaguely inappropriate to the judge.
Yes.
Saturday Night Live making fun of the politicians, which is brutal. People hate when they're being made fun of. That is something politicians do not like.
I think you should host it, Judge.
But seriously, listen to the words of supposed silver lining to what is the single most catastrophic sequence of events for American democracy and the rule of law, as I said before, since the founding almost 250 years ago. So, but turning to your question, the courts. If all of the individuals who attacked the United States Capitol on January 6th are prosecuted and imprisoned, that will all be for naught if Donald Trump is not held accountable. Now, the only thing in this life that I know anything at all about is the courts. And the court, Donald Trump, is going to test the federal judiciary in the coming months, unlike it's ever been tested before and will ever be tested again. And frankly, it remains to be seen who will win that standoff, Donald Trump or the federal judiciary. I mean, every day we witness something literally unprecedented in all of our history. It was not but a few weeks ago where Donald Trump in open court said to the judge face to face, "It's you who cannot control yourself, Judge, not me," in the earshot of the jury in New York. I cannot even imagine what Donald Trump will say in open court to the judge, to Jack Smith, and to the jury when and if he's ever tried for his offenses against the nation on January 6th. But speaking of the courts, what are the courts doing right now? I mean, we're awaiting a decision, a very simple decision, as to whether the Supreme Court will hear the absolute immunity case. There is no reason in this world for the United States Supreme Court to take and review that case. And if it does, it will be telling.
We don't
On the
expect they will.
Well, I don't know. Do you have an inside that I don't?
No, but I don't expect they will.
Well, so for the 14th Amendment case, it's disqualification. Section 3 of the 14th Amendment was written
Donald Trump.
by the framers of the Constitution to disqualify the former president from holding the presidency again in 2024. But in a 2-hour argument before the highest court in the land, there was barely a single question on the constitutional arguments that were being made. The only thing that was clear from the moment that the court took the bench was that it was not going to decide whether Donald Trump is disqualified under the 14th Amendment. Not now, and not ever.
Do you find it interesting or disturbing or what, that it seems like some of these trial judges, state and federal, let's leave apart the woman in Florida, seem to be showing much more oomph, if you will, in fighting back against Donald Trump and fighting back against his disrespect for the rule of law? Judge Kaplan in New York, you just mentioned. Do you think there's what do you make of that? That maybe lower court judges are actually more stalwart than Supreme Court justices?
Well, I disagree with your thesis.
Oh.
But it was only a few weeks ago that the first federal judge, and it was a federal district judge, who said for the first time in the past 3 or 4 years, who told the truth. Judge Royce Lamberth, senior judge on the district court in the District of Columbia, in sentencing one of the January 6th defendants, finally could not hold back any longer, and he spoke the truth. And he said, "I cannot believe the lies and the deception that has taken hold in America. This is a question of right and wrong, and it is the duty of this court to tell the American people. That was the first federal judge who, in my view, had said anything particularly notable outside the four corners of an opinion, though I would hasten to add that the D.C. Circuit, stepped up in the absolute immunity case. If there's been a temporary failure, it's been by the Supreme Court of the United States.
No, that was sort of my question. Why? Why is that? Why do justices with life tenure, what are they afraid of?
They do not want to decide whether the former president's disqualified under Section 3, and that's an unjustified response. Their duty is to interpret the Constitution, whether they want to or not.
Do you think there's anything we should be doing in the future to basically buck up the courts when it comes to confronting threats to the Constitution and to the democracy?
It's not the responsibility of we the people to buck up the Supreme Court of the United States.
Okay. Barbara,
Well,
can you buck me up?
Well, I think when you're looking at the immunity case, I think they're handling that. I think we'll see that soon, and I think everybody feels fairly confident where that's going. The lower court had a very solid decision
Right.
that I feel good about where that's going. And I think when you look at some of the redistricting cases that the court has handled, I think, when Donald Trump or Republicans have said, when Donald Trump has talked about these being my justices, they've not been my justices. So I feel good about where some of these things are going, yes.
But for the future,
Yeah.
what about the need to educate the public? As of somebody who's run for public office and spoken to people in the shopping centers and
Well,
whatnot.
I think the failure has been on the part of the electeds who have not stood up, except, for the few who have said, and that's why, when the leaders, when the people lead, the leaders will follow. So that's why you here are so important, because you are leading, and when Trump loses, and when those people in those swing districts make the decision, and those are going to be, by and large, women disproportionately are going to be making those decisions in those swing states. And I can tell you, because it's, swing states in Republican areas, it's mostly, red states, they don't know those areas. They just don't know them. They're not talking to you. So it's going to be a surprise to them. In Virginia last year, you can look at what happened in Virginia. People thought they were going to flip the Senate in Virginia, State House, and hold the House. They did not flip the Senate, and they lost the House. So that's that's sort of a precursor of what happened. And a lot of that was sort of a Trump, effect. So that's the kind of thing that happens. And when that kind of thing happens, then the leaders look at that and say, well, why did that happen? And you scratch the surface, and I think it is a Trump effect there. And that's when they say, oh, why didn't we listen to you, the people? And so for the past 4 years, they've been listening to Trump. They are scared of him, and because he can go in and impact your primary. And that's why, with one little word, they're afraid they'll have to lose their August recess and go work and fight off a primary and do something like that. And that's why you don't, you'll hear from Adam today and from others, but That's the fear that people have, and it's really unfortunate, and it impacts things like you saw what happened with Ukraine aid, but now fortunately I think people talked about yesterday how Brian Fitzpatrick is saying no, we need to have maybe they're going to have a discharge petition, things like that. We need to see more action like that. But it's people like you going to your representatives, going to your senators. I mean, the Senate has 6-year terms. They took action there. So, you need to reach out and say, these things are important. But you need to get involved and engaged and say, it's not, you can't cower and not, these issues are too important. We are living through, with what's going on in Israel, what's going on in Ukraine, the death of Navalny. We cannot stay silent on these things. What's happening at the border? Everyone was really concerned at what was happening on the border. Then they got a solution. The Senate passed it, and then they said, no, we don't want to do anything because Donald Trump said no. People saw that for what it was. That was a key issue in the Swazi race. So these are all legal issues. These were things that were really hammered out legally and legislatively. And, I think these are things are, going to play out. And, you people are going to have an impact on that this year.
So, Judge, if we can't buck up the Supreme Court, that's not what our job is, what should we be doing? What is it that we can all do, whether we're lawyers or just...
Well, I think we need to...
Well, what can we do to improve the prospects for constitutionalism and the rule of law in this country going forward?
Well, I'm tempted to say, on the heels of Barbara's statements there, that we ought to need to buck her up further so that she can, in turn, buck up everyone that needs bucking up. But no, to my friend and Pollyanna politician to my right, I would say this, that today's politicians...
Failure is not an option here. We've got to... these are important issues.
Yeah, Guantanamo it's either failure or Guantanamo.
But today's politicians never believe that they have to choose between country and their partisan politics, when every single day of the week they are required to choose between those two, and they just refuse. So, we always talk about outreach to our politicians. Well, one could be forgiven if he believed that that's hopeless. The politicians under the Constitution, they exercise and wield our power, the power of we the people. It's not their power. We loan them our power temporarily so that they will exercise that power on our behalf. So the only answer today, in this moment, is for us to take back our power from the politicians who have breached faith with the American people, and return our power to public officials who understand that they exercise our power in the best interest of the United States of America, not their own personal partisan political interests.
And I think it's often, learning, about all of these, these false allegations of election fraud that are going, that are all out there, and these, and just knowing how your election system works in your state, because often people who are, putting out those lies, if you're actively engaged in working your polls, locally, you can tell people, because people who are getting that disinformation, you can just calmly tell them, have you worked at the polls? Do you know how this works? I mean, I've had people say these things to me, like, well, what about these boxes? What happens to them? What do they do with them? I said, well, when you go and vote at the high school, they don't keep those votes sitting there at the high school forevermore. They have to take, you vote there, and then those votes are, tabulated, and then they don't keep them at the high school, right? The high school will continue to be a high school. Then the votes are taken elsewhere. And so you just have to, have you ever worked at the polls? No, they haven't worked at the polls. So you just have to explain that process to them. So if you're engaged and involved in the process, then you can explain to people and be polite and nice to them and explain the process, and maybe ask them, would you like to go through this process and maybe get involved yourself? And because then they'll have more confidence in the system themselves, and talk to people who are involved. And the more they get involved and engaged, because people have confidence in their local system. And what's interesting is last year in Virginia, it's only when Donald Trump is on the ballot that people don't concede an election, and maybe Carrie Lake. But last year, in Virginia, we had a lot of close elections, and everybody conceded. When they lost by a few votes in Virginia, people conceded. We had our local, our state officials in Virginia, our Democrat and Republican, said fair elections. People who lost by 100 votes or 50 votes said fair election, everything was fine. So we had clean elections in Virginia. It was 51-49, and close in the Senate, close in the House, and everyone said fair, good elections, hard fought. Both sides wanted to win. So that was a great model of, even when it's close, we can do it right. So it's only when Donald Trump is on the ballot, usually, or Carrie Lake, that it gets nasty like that. Same thing has happened in other states. Michigan got a little crazy too, because the woman who lost by 16 points, who was the Michigan party chair, she still hasn't conceded. So, but it's really just with him. So really, if you get involved and engaged locally.
Is it really just with him? I mean, you mentioned the poll earlier, the exit polls from yesterday, about how 2/3 of the Republican electorate believed Trump's election lies. Why is that? Why?
But then when you localize it, they believe their own elections locally are clean. So once he's out of the picture and he loses this year, we will be able to get back to normal and then bring people back to the light. And so that's going to be the issue.
I think we have. Okay. I think we have a dissenting vote on the here over there.
No, it just occurred to me
Oh, it's raining.
that we cannot be naive about the danger that lurks. This is not a question of educating the people as to their elections. The danger that lurks is that the people who deny that Joe Biden is the legitimate president of the United States, they know for a fact that he is, but they refuse to recognize him. That's a danger that far exceeds any danger that we have ever faced before in this country.
That raises the question. I mean, how
Yeah,
much?
the demagogues should be called out too, and you should call them out if those are your representatives.
And there
Call
are
them
many
out
to
on
call
that.
out.
Yeah. And you can go to your town halls and call them out on that. What is your evidence? And when they do that, they've been called out, and they look ridiculous when you call them out on that.
But this kind of raises the question: how much does the rule of law and constitutionalism depend not on the language of particular provisions, not on the Federalist Papers, not on the qualifications of Article III judges, but on the character of a people?
Well, it depends entirely on the character of the people, as the Founding Fathers recognized and said that in their words, they said that unless the American people are people of principle and responsibility, then this democracy that they were creating could not long endure. But if you want to particularize it to the Constitution and the rule of law, again, by design, the judiciary has neither the purse nor the sword. It depends entirely on the respect that its judgments can command. And that's one of the problems for the Supreme Court today. Whether correct or not, it is not commanding the respect for its judgments that is necessary in order for the Supreme Court to save the country from the perils that it faces.
And then certainly the character of the leaders is so important, and that's, on January 6th and leading up, the character of certain leaders. Fortunately, a certain leader who reached out to Judge Luttig, Brad Raffensperger, who's here, Governor Kemp. Those key leaders are the people who saved us. Will we have those leaders in the future is up to you here. But that is the big concern, and that is the issue, I think, of this year. So that is, I think, what we're all very concerned about. And having a demagogue like Trump is what the threat is, and how he has cowered people to not care about character. And
I think that's the note we should end on. I mean, I think we all agree, constitutionalism, the rule of law, really depends on the character of a people. And the reason why, personally, I'm optimistic, I mean, I admit there's a small chance of a great disaster happening, is people like you. People like you show the character of our people. And it is up to all of us to show others, to set the example, and defend what's right, defend the truth, and in the end, defend our constitutional democracy. And we all so appreciate you coming out to listen to us today. But you guys are more important. And what you guys say when you leave this place is much more important than what we have said here. Thank you.